Offshore health and safety inspections by the HSE are a routine and important part of how major accident risks are regulated on the UK continental shelf. They are not rare events and they are not informal walkthroughs. Each year, around 130 offshore inspections take place across UK installations. These inspections are planned, risk-based and targeted at the areas that matter most for major accident prevention. Before an inspection, an agenda is typically issued shortly beforehand, setting out the inspection topics and the areas of focus. A typical offshore inspection involves a team of inspectors, each concentrating on specific topics, such as maintenance management, verification, control of work, emergency response, or well integrity. Inspections usually last 2 to 4 days offshore, depending on the scope and the complexity of the visit. Inspections normally include closeout meetings offshore and in some cases follow-up closeout discussions onshore, where findings, concerns and next steps are explained. Inspectors are not attempting to review everything on board. They deliberately focus on specific topics selected because weaknesses in those areas could realistically contribute to a serious injury or to a major accident. Inspection topics are not neutral. They are chosen because the regulator believes they represent areas of elevated risk across the industry or on a particular installation. Inspectors also look closely at how work is managed across interfaces, including how contractors are controlled and how responsibilities are shared between different parties. Importantly, inspections are not focused only on the abnormal situations or obvious failures. They often examine routine work, day-to-day decision-making, and how normal operations are managed under pressure. The way inspectors assess findings and decide on enforcement action is guided by a structured decision-making framework called the Enforcement Management Model, or EMM. The purpose of the EMM is to ensure enforcement decisions are consistent, proportionate, and focused on controlling real risk. During an inspection, inspectors first identify priorities for action. If an inspector believes that there's a risk of a serious personal injury or worse, this takes priority over everything else. Inspectors have the power to stop work immediately. Risk is controlled first, and wider enforcement decisions follow later. Once immediate risks are addressed, inspectors assess how far the installation or activity has fallen below what the law expects. This is done using a concept known as the risk gap. The risk gap compares the actual risk created by how work is really being carried out and the benchmark risk expected if legal requirements and good practice were being properly met. Enforcement decisions are based on credible potential harm, not on whether an accident has already occurred. The absence of an incident does not mean the risk is acceptable. The larger the gap between actual and benchmark risk, the more serious the enforcement response is likely to be. Inspection findings are then scored. A poor or very poor score indicates weaknesses in control that could reasonably contribute to a major accident if left unaddressed. Across recent offshore inspection programmes, around 1/4 of all topics assessed fall into this category. These scores are not academic. Poor and very poor scores often trigger closer regulatory attention, follow-up inspections, and can lead directly to formal enforcement if weaknesses are not addressed. The topics inspected typically include areas such as maintenance management, operational risk assessment, verification and assurance of safety critical elements, control of work, workforce engagement, human factors, evacuation, escape and rescue, loss of containment, well integrity, structural integrity, and audit, monitoring and review. Inspectors use legislation, approved codes of practice, guidance, inspection guidance to define what good looks like for each topic. Inspection guides clearly explain regulatory expectations, the evidence inspectors look for, and the applicable regulations and recognised good practice. Based on the size of the risk gap, inspectors form an initial enforcement expectation. This may range from a verbal warning to a formal letter to an improvement notice, or in the most serious cases, prosecution. Prosecution does not require a previous warning. In cases involving high risk and a clear failure against well-established standards, enforcement can escalate quickly.